Hello, welcome to our first inspirations class. I'm going to be teaching watercolor today, but we have loads of talented inspirations facilitators just waiting to give you a class on their chosen subject. So don't forget to check the other videos. Make a great Christmas gift for your friends if you want to find something that you can support locally. We're going to be working on some Christmas cards, very timely for this time of year. And I'm going to try and show you a few different ways you can use watercolor to make a simple Christmas card. So let's get started on the first card, which is a little Christmas tree, and I will show you everything you need to know to make this card. So our first card is a little triangle, and I need to tape the triangle off first so that it has a lovely clean edge. So I have a piece of paper here that is 4 inches by 5.5 inches. And you may wonder, why is it that measurement? Well, I buy these cards from the craft store. There's 50 in this package. They come with envelopes. And I like to have my paper so it matches the size of the card. So I can cut a nice colored border for the card, and it's all central and equal. So I'll give you the measurements as we go along, but this one is going to be this measurement, 4 inches, because it's very easy to divide in half. We're going to go 2 inches across the paper, just here, for the center of the tree. And we're going to make sure the top of the tree is also 2 inches because you don't want your tree leaning over. The base of the tree is going to be 1.25 inches each side of the center. And I'm going to tape that first one off with some masking tape to get a nice clean line and put that over here. Now, that masking tape, you can sort of decide where you'd like it, but I would like mine 1.25 up from the base of the paper, and the top of my tree is going to be 1/2 inch down from the top of the paper. And I've made a little mark. Now, you don't want to make your marks too dark because you won't be able to erase them after you're finished. Now I'm going to put one piece of the tape on this little mark and one on that one to make that side of the triangle. And same on this side and that side of the triangle. And that should be a nice even triangle. Now, try not to splash your paint on the outside. Sometimes I do that and I get a little annoyed with myself, but that's how things go. I'm going to start with, I'm going to show you the example again. I'm going to start with the light colors, and I'm actually going to start with some light blues. Although this looks like a green tree, we want to put a little bit of blue in there as well, so we have some contrast between the light colors and the darker colors. This is a really simple one. If you haven't done much painting, this is a great one to start with. I have a few little palettes here. I'm going to bring this little one over, and I'm going to get a color called cerulean blue. It's a lovely sky blue, a light blue, and I'm going to mix it with quite a bit of water because I want this to be very, very light. And I'm going to start by doing a diagonal line just near the top of the tree. Now, I want this to dry quite quickly. I don't want to spend a lot of time waiting for the layers of paint. So I don't want to do it too wet, and I want to space it out. So if I have some light blue at the top of the tree here, I'm going to get a slightly bigger brush for the bottom of the tree. This is a size 8 brush, if you're curious what size brush I'm using. I'm going to mix a little bit of green with that blue because I want the variety of color. And I'm going to do a stripe across the bottom that's not as thin as this one, not the same diagonal, just slightly different. I'm going to mix a little bit more green with that blue, and I'm going to do another stripe around the middle of the tree. Now this top blue stripe should be starting to dry a little bit, so I'm going to put a little bit more green in there. I'm not going to cover it up. I'm just going to go at a different angle beside it. It doesn't matter if it bleeds a little bit into the other one, that's okay. I'm going to get a little bit more of that cerulean blue that I was talking about, and I'm going to make a stronger mix. And use this green here was a sap green. I should have told you that. This green I had here. So a sap green is a lovely, just a lovely green like you'd see on leaves and trees. And mix that with the blue. And I'm going to do another different green here. Now I'm feeling like I need a bit more blue, but maybe I want to change the blue. So there's a lovely soft blue called a cobalt blue. I'm going to get some of that, a little bit of water, and I'm going to change to a different blue here. And notice every time I do a line, it's a slightly different angle. I don't want them all to be the same. I'm actually going to do one right horizontally across here, about a third of the way down. Now I think I've got enough blue in there. I want to go a little darker with my green now. And there is a very strong, intense green called a phthalo green. I'm going to get the phthalo green. I wouldn't usually use a palette this small, but because I want you to see what I'm doing, and I hope you can see what I'm doing, I'm just using this small portable palette to mix in. When I'm at home or when I'm in my studio, I would have a much, much bigger palette to mix my colors. I'm going to put this lovely phthalo green at the top here. I'm going to get a little bit more phthalo green, make it a bit stronger, and I'm going to take this across the bottom here. Now I'm looking at my sample and I can see I've got some very beautiful yellow greens in there. So let's go into my yellows. A bit of a dirty palette here. So here's the trick if your palette gets dirty and you want some space. Little wet sponge and just clean a little bit of space like that and you're ready to go. So put my number 8 brush down and lost it. That's what I often do. Found it again. Go fine. Good to go. All right. Azo yellow. Lovely bright yellow. And I'm actually just going to use the yellow as it is for one of these center stripes. And you know why? Because it's going to blend and cover some of those greens, and it will read as a light bright green as it fades into all those greens. I think I need another one there. I'm going to mix a little bit of green with that. So I do have a light green, and I want to get a nice stripe across the bottom here, even down into this corner. Now, if I was painting this at home, or I wanted to use my very noisy hairdryer at this point, I might just dry this or wait for it to dry. But I don't really want to do that today. I just want to show you the basics of how you're going to do this. So I'm going to keep working on this, but you will find you'll get much more defined stripes if you actually let this layer dry for a little while. So I'm going to get some ultramarine blue now. Nice deep warm blue, strong blue, and I'm going to make a very dark blue-green, and I'm going to put some of that at the top of the tree. I'm going to get even more of that ultramarine blue, and I want to put some more dark blue at the bottom of the tree. If I want to make this even darker, I'm going to add some burnt sienna, which is an orange-brown. And orange is the complementary color of blue, and you can darken it up by adding its complementary color. So I want to get a nice dark stripe here. I'm going to add even more ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. Get this a little darker. And take that through here. I'm going to add some phthalo green, darker again, and some burnt sienna. What I want to do now is have that contrast of the light and dark for this tree. And at this point, I'm feeling quite happy about how that's looking. I think I might add a little bit more sap green. I'm going to put some sap green with this yellow. And when I do my class New Adventures in Watercolor, which is for the complete beginner painter who's never done watercolor before, I am going to show you all of these colors and color mixing. We'll make green charts, we'll make gray charts, we'll learn all about how the colors mix, how you can mix your own greens. You only need to buy 1, possibly 2 greens. Everything else can be mixed with blue and yellow and some of the brown. So that is upcoming in my new adventures in watercolor. And if you have done some painting in my further adventures in watercolor, again, that's something we're always going to be doing. We're going to be revisiting all of the color mixing that we can do to make beautiful colors and colors that are complementary to each other. Now, usually I would have a hairdryer to dry this, but I'm just going to put this to one side, and I think we'll work on the second Christmas card because we can come back to finish this when this is dried a little bit. And you'll see on my example, the lines are much drier, and I might put a few extra thin lines in when this is dried. I've also put some gold dots, a gold star, a green background, some lettering. So we'll see if we have time to do that. I'm going to put this to one side. Let me put this down here for a moment. I'll forget where it is, but somebody will help me remember where I put it. I'm sure they will. And let's look for the Christmas bauble. I was really smart. Look, I labeled these. I can't believe I was that organized, but there we go. You learn things as you get older, I think. I should be brilliant by now. I'm that old. Right. So we're going to do a Christmas bauble. And for this, you'll need something round to trace your bauble. It is, I've used, whoops, sorry about the noise. I've used a stencil, and I've used the 2.5-inch stencil. I got this at Michael's, really useful. But you may not have a stencil, that's okay. You could use, I have a lid here to a spice pot, that's close enough. I have a cookie cutter, that's exactly pretty much 2.5. I have the lid to the fabric softener, pretty much 2.5. So anything you have around the house is useful. And I'm going to use, to do my outline, I'm going to use a watercolor pencil. You don't have to use a watercolor pencil. You can use an ordinary pencil. You can use an ordinary pencil crayon. You could use a black Micron pen. In fact, Micron makes their pens in all colors. So if you had a blue Micron pen, that would be fine too. It's up to you. I just chose, for this one, I thought my watercolor pencil would blend with the exterior of the bauble and give a nice effect. So that's what I used. I also would like to do a quick little word about paper. This is a great budget paper, the Canson XL watercolor paper. I think I picked this up at Walmart for $9.99, something like that. And there are 30 sheets of 9 by 12. And if you quarter that sheet, it comes out at 4.5 by 6, which is a standard watercolor size and a good framing size, and great for making the cards. 4.5 by 6 is perfect for these 6.5 by 5-inch cards. So that is something you can use. Another watercolor paper I really like are these little blocks that I got from Iron Oxide. And they are called fluid watercolor paper. They are gummed on 2 sides, and they are a lovely 140-pound paper. This is cold press, and this is hot press, very smooth. These are 4 by 6, very handy to use, so you could use those. Or this piece that I have here is a piece of arch paper. And again, if you take my New Adventures in Watercolor class, I will show you how if you buy a 22 by 30-inch piece of arch paper, we can divide that into 25 squares. So you pay about $9 for a sheet, but you get a lot of paper out of it. It actually works out much cheaper than this. It's higher quality. So let's see, how far down do I want my bauble? Let's measure this. This one is 1 3/4 inches. Down from the top of the paper, I'm measuring from the top of the paper, 1 3/4 inches. Now this paper is slightly different size. So it's 3 3/4. I don't know my math now. 3 3/4, what's half of that? Okay, 1.5 is half of 3, and then I think another 1/8. We should be at 1 3/4. Does that sound right to my tech guys? No, that doesn't look right to me. 1 7/8. 1 7/8. Thank you. There we go, 1 7/8. We don't want it to be not in the center. Thank you. I did do all my math ahead of time. I forgot that one. It's actually on the sheets. If you take the live class, if you are there live, you will get the sheets with the instructions, with the measurements, and everything worked out for you. You don't have to do a lot of thinking. I do all the thinking for you. So there we go. We've got the ribbon for the bauble, and I want my trusty. Now the thing I like about this stencil is that your half a circle, or quarter circles actually, are all measured out for you. If you've measured your line here for your half of your paper, you don't have to guess. You've got your measurement lines. These are really handy little stencils to have if you do a lot of graphic work or painting. On top of the bauble, I want to draw the little metal holder that's on the top there, and a little circle for the ribbon to go through. And then I want to get my watercolor pencil, and I want to go over that with the watercolor pencil. Now these watercolor pencils, you can use them just like a regular coloring pencils, but if you put water on them, they bleed and dissolve just like paint. So they're kind of lovely in that way. I'll show you on here. I'll do a little coloring on here. There's two ways you can use them. You can actually put your wet brush onto the pencil and get paint. Look at that. Gives you a lovely painted surface. Or you can just put your wet brush onto the watercolor pencil. So they're really lovely. Another lovely gift if you're looking for Christmas gifts. Iron Oxide, down the road from us, they will give you 10% off if you're taking this class. So just remember to tell them they're doing an honor system. She says they're going to get a membership card that I can send you pretty soon, but you can go in there, tell them you're taking the class, and she will give you the 10% discount. Now what I'm doing here, I'll show you the card again. I'm wetting this area for the sky. I want to leave this area white for the snow with a bit of shadow. So I'm not going to wet the area down here that I want white for the snow. I'm wetting the area here that I want dark for the sky. And I'm going to start with my lightest blue. I'm going to bring this over. So I've got a clean palette. So my lightest blue in this one is going to be what's called phthalo blue. It's a beautiful, intense, bright, transparent blue. And I don't want to use it too strong because it's a very strong color. And what some people who are new to watercolor don't realize is that you need to mix your paints with water in a palette. You don't just take your brush to the paint and paint directly on the paper like you might with a tempera paint or an oil paint or an acrylic paint. These have to be diluted, and they're very, very strong. So you have to make sure you dilute them enough. Now I'm going to put that phthalo blue, that intense lightish blue, in the center of that water. I'll get my palette out of the way. Now I'm going to go to a color called indigo. That's a very dark blue. Almost a black, what you'd call a navy blue, dark navy blue. And I want to do the exterior of the sky here with the indigo. Now I'm going to add a little water here. I'm going to grab a Kleenex. Something you should always have handy when you're painting is Kleenex and something to wipe your brush on. If you get too much water or too much paint, you can just dab it up with the Kleenex. But what I want to do is have a little bit of cloud going up into this. I want to put a little water there so that the sort of cloud drifts up into the paint. As long as this area is wet, you can keep adding pigment. I'm going to add a little bit more indigo to the outside. You don't so much paint it in as you drop it in, so that it sort of stays where you put it and just blends a little bit with your water. I feel like I need a little bit more phthalo blue in the center here, so I'm going to drop. I'm going to get a nice amount of pigment on my paintbrush and drop that in. Now, I'm a particularly splashy, messy painter, and I got a little bit of water up here that I don't really want, so I'm going to use my Kleenex to dab that up. If I get splatters, I just splatter more to disguise the fact, make it look like I deliberately splattered. But most of the time, I do try and keep it fairly clean. You'll be amazed how much water gets dropped on everything that you do. All right, now the snow area, I'm going to keep this nice and dry in between where the sky is and where the snow is, and this will dry a bit lighter as it dries. And I'm going to wet this area where the snow is going to be. What I want to really do is wet that watercolor pencil on the edge of the bauble, so I get a soft blending there of the watercolor pencil. And then I'm going to use a little bit of the phthalo blue, not too dark this time, to put in some snow shadow. And I'm going to do some trees. I cannot do the trees until this sky up here is dry. So I have to wait for that to dry so I can do my trees. What I can do while I'm waiting for that is I can run some water down the ribbon. And I'm going to do the metal hanger and the top of it with a silver pen and a black pen. And again, if you don't have a silver pen, that's okay. You could paint it gray or use gray pencil crayon. You could use a silver pencil crayon if you've got one. Sometimes the Crayola pencils have a silver and a golden, just the ones you buy for school for the children. So you don't have to spend a lot of money to do watercolor. It's one of the arts that are quite affordable. So this needs to dry. When it is dry, I will be putting in these little trees and the little snowdrops. I'll actually move this out of the way and show you how I do the little snowdrops. I have what's called a jelly roll pen. They're very affordable too, $2 or $3. Iron oxide has every color under the sun. And they come in many different sizes. And I just use the jelly roll pen and put some little dots of snow on there. You may see that it's glittering. And I also have a glitter pen, jelly roll pen over here somewhere. And you can put the little glittery snowflakes in with the, here it is, it was a silver one. So here's the silver pen. So if I wanted to do the bauble, what I used was the silver jelly roll pen and then black pen. You can't often pick up the metallics on the camera, but they do look really beautiful in real life. So I'm going to put this one to one side and put that one down there so that that dries a little bit. And that's the thing with watercolor. You either have to use a hairdryer to get something dry quickly, or you have to wait for it to dry. Which is, when we do these classes, I've often prepared more than one painting for you to work on, because if you don't want to stop to dry everything, and I don't really want to be using the very noisy hairdryer when we're filming, you can be waiting for one to dry while we're working on the other one, and then we don't have to sit around chatting and having a cup of tea while our paint dries. So this one is called Winter Wonderland. I'm just looking for my sample here. I start with everything very organized within reach, and by the time half an hour's gone by, I have a complete disaster area on my table and everything's all over the place. So that's just the way I work. So this one is bigger. This is 4.5 by 6 inches, which is the size of the quarter sheet of the Canson. And you can see it fits on the 5 by 6.5 inch card just nicely. I have a piece of blue card behind it. And this moon here is made with a colored sticker, which I had. See, here they are. Excuse me. You can get these from any stationery store, any dollar store, almost anywhere that you can buy school supplies. And I'm going to put my moon in the top right corner. Now, when you're doing art, you have to be very careful not to have anything dead center unless it's really part of your plan to have something dead center. It's not particularly good composition-wise to have something dead center. So I'm going to have my moon to the top right, and on this picture I'm going to have my trees sort of bottom left here, and that gives a balance. There's something on both sides to balance the picture. And that's the other reason why I decided to have my snowbank curving upwards. If I'd had it curving downwards with these heavy trees here, it would kind of look like everything is sliding down this slope. So I curved it upwards to keep the painting balanced. So that's what I want to do next. About 1/3 of the way down the paper, and I usually just do it by eye. You can measure it if you want to. About 1/3 of the way down the paper, I'm going to put a very light pencil line for the first snowbank. And then I'm going to have one coming in the opposite direction, and then one here. So they're not all the same direction, they're not all the same width. And we're going to start with the sky. Now this one has a lot of snow in it, and there's 2 ways you can make snow. On this painting, I have made snow with the Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White paint, which is very opaque and beautiful for splattering snow. And on this little card, I've used salt for snow. So I thought we'd try both of them. This one, the snow goes on last. So I want to paint the sky first. I'm going to use a bigger brush. This is a 5/8 of an inch brush. You can use 5/8, 1/2 inch, 1 inch, just something that you can get the sky and the water on fairly quickly with broad strokes. And I want to wet just up to that pencil line there and over the sticker. Once you've pushed that sticker down, it will be nice and firm. And if you don't paint too wet, it shouldn't go underneath the sticker. It should be just fine. You can peel it off afterwards. It's not going to stay there. You don't have a red moon. You don't have to worry. Okay, I'm not one to waste paint, so let's go back to this indigo and phthalo blue that we have here. And I'm going to add to that, and get my number 8 brush. I'm going to add a little bit of cerulean here. We want some different colors. And I'm going to gray that down with the trick that we did on the Christmas tree. I'm going to use some burnt sienna, which is an orangey brown. And if I use that, it's going to gray down that blue color. And I actually want to warm it up a little bit. So I'm going to use a rose color. I've got one that's called Permanent Rose. Now, I've made it too warm. It doesn't matter. I'm going to add in a bit more blue, a little bit more brown. That's what mixing's all about. It's sort of an alchemy. You add a little bit of this, a little bit of that, until you get what you want. A bit more blue. What I want is some sort of winter cloud colors. A little bit more blue. Don't want it too brown. And I have that cerulean blue. Now remember, my paper's wet and my water is soaking in. If you leave it too long, it'll dry, so you need to get to it before it's too dry. And I want to put my cerulean blue on there, a little bit of water, go right across my moon sticker, and then I'm going to take some of that dark gray color and I'm going to put that on. And I'm going to lighten up that gray color with some water. Take it down to the snowbank and a little bit more cerulean blue. You can let them mix on the paper, wet and wet. If you keep your snowbank dry, they won't go beyond your pencil line, no worries. A bit more cloud. Now that just needs to blend with the water, settle, soak in. I'm going to define the snowbanks with that same color, but very much more diluted. I don't want it too dark. So I'm going to come down the snowbank. I've put a lot of water with that color, and I'm going to use just water on my brush to just soften that in. Now I can see now that I want a little bit more blue down here by the edge of the snowbank, and then it can just blend up into the water that I put on there. And I want to do the same for this snowbank down here, so I'm going to put the blue on, or the gray blue, or a mixture of both. And that's a very hard line. I don't want a hard line like that. That's what we call a hard line in painting. I'm going to soften that line with some water. And that's that stage. I can't put the trees on while this is wet because they will just flood into this color and make a huge mess of my painting. Maybe put a little bit more gray here. I like to have close to the edges and close to something like the moon. I like to have a bit more dark because it forms a sort of a border to your painting. Right, I have a whole collection on the floor here of wet paintings. I'm going to put another one to that collection. I'm going to have a look at the first Christmas tree that we did. Now it's drying up. It's not completely dry, but I think it's to a stage where I can peel the tape off. And because I know this is 100% Arches cotton paper, masking tape will just peel off of that, no problem at all. It doesn't tear, it doesn't stick too fast. But if you're using one of those cheaper papers, and they're still good quality, but they are cheaper than the Arches, and sometimes they are a paper pulp and not cotton, your masking tape will tear the paper. And the trick to that is, I'm not going to turn the hairdryer on, but if you heat your masking tape up with your hairdryer just for a few seconds, it melts the glue and your masking tape will just peel off without tearing your paper. So it's a good little thing to remember, because there's nothing worse than doing a lovely painting and then you tear it all when you peel the masking tape off. Same with the little moon sticker. Now I'm looking for I have a lot of these jelly roll pens, and this is a little gold one that I really love. And I'm just going to do a little star at the top of that tree. And I don't think the paint is dry enough to do a lot of baubles on it, but you can, when it's dry, do a few little gold baubles with the jelly roll pen. I have, where did I put it? I have a sparkly green and gold pen that I'm just going to write Merry here. I've mapped it out, again, because you don't want it to be off center. You don't know how much room you need for the word. So I usually write mine on a separate piece of paper. I measure it. I measure where the middle of the word is, and then I map it out in pencil before I go over it with pen. I'm going to go over that word Merry with this lovely sparkly green and gold pen, which I also got from iron oxide. They are all around $2 or $3 each, these pens. They last a long time. You may have realized I have a lot of art supplies. I'm rather addicted to them, but that's okay. I think it's still a little bit too wet to put too many baubles in. And the other thing is, I'm not going to erase close to the Merry, but before you finish up everything, you need to make sure you get rid of your pencil lines. The Merry's too wet to do that, the paint's too wet. To finish off my erasing, And I don't like to smudge my eraser bits, so I have a lovely soft brush to get rid of them. Now I'm going to take off my tape. I just want to show you how you can finish this off to make a Christmas card. And like I said, it's not completely dry yet, so I have to be very careful. I have here some. Now this piece of backing card is shiny green, and it is 4 1/4 inches by 5 3/4 inches. It should give about 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch border. I can't remember which I allowed, but it's just a nice little border around your card. There's many ways you can glue it down to your paper. I'm going to put this on a Kleenex just in case the paint's wet. But my preferred way of gluing things down is with, that's why I tried the word Mary on the back there, is with double-sided tape. I get this at the Dollar Tree. The reason I like double-sided tape is it is dry mounting and very permanent. Wet glue will bubble up your watercolor paper and you won't kind of get a nice flat finish. Also, it's very messy. If you get a little bit of wet glue somewhere else on your paper, you can forever see that glue afterwards. And glue stick is pretty good, but I always find I have to weigh everything down with a pile of books if I use a glue stick to get it to stick nice and flat. And all of those things take time, and this is pretty instant. Now, I've put tape on all 4 edges. The reason I like this tape rather than the tape snail is the tape snail, as it's called, comes in a big plastic case, and you have to throw away the plastic case every time you run out of tape, which is often, and I don't like using plastic and throwing it away. This just has a sort of a wax protector to it, which you peel off. Now, I peel off one side only. I learned this by doing it wrong so many times. Once this tape sticks, it's stuck. You cannot pull it back up again, which is one disadvantage because you really need to get your picture on there nice and straight. And if you've got all 4 sides sticky, you put it like this, it's stuck. So I just have always the bottom, so I don't get confused, always the bottom tape is sticky, and I don't touch the bottom tape, and I get the other 3 sides lined up nice and straight. And I do it by eye, but you can do it with little pencil marks if you like. And then when it's all straight, I firm down the bottom and I gently lift the top. This is the trickiest part of the whole thing, is removing that sort of wax paper backing to the tape. $1.25 from the Dollar Tree. Really excellent for crafts. No mess. And then I just firm the rest of it down. And no mess, no glue on anything, instantly stuck. Now, these are the cards, come in a pack of 50 with matching envelopes. They're already creased, so I just fold them again. And then this will go on here, and you have a nice even border because all the sizes fit these cards. It'll have a nice even border. And I repeat the steps with the tape and tape that to the card. And later when it's dry, I will erase that, put a few more gold dots on. So that is your Christmas tree card, almost finished. Now, what one were we working on next? We're working on the bauble. Let's have a look at that and see how that's doing. It's still a little bit wet, but I'm going to finish that one off anyway, and we'll just do what we can with the wet paint. So I'm going to get a very, very small brush. I have a size 2 brush here. I need a garbage can. I'll throw it on the floor. Somebody can clean it up later. We'll get someone to do that. Okay, I'm going to put the trees in now. So I have the same blues. I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine. Actually, I'm going to bring my green palette over here because I'm going to make use of this blue-green that I made here, and I'm going to add some ultramarine blue to that, a little bit more water. And I'm going to make a nice dark blue-green for these little trees. Now, because that's not perfectly dry, I may have a little bit of bleeding at this stage, but we won't worry too much about that. Put these little trees on. They might look very nice or kind of bleeding into the sky, and the bottoms will look more hard-edged. So there we go. So I'm going to put one almost in the center, and I know I said don't do that, it's almost the center, but I'm going to balance that by some more trees either side of it. There's going to be some here and some here. And I'm even going to do a few over here. All different heights, different size trees. If this was perfectly dry, like I would really like it to be, I could do some much lighter trees in the background. I could if you look at my palette, I have some blue and green over here that I've added some water to, which is much lighter than this one. And I could, in the background, do a much lighter blue-green tree that pushes it off into the distance. What I also want under these trees, back to my, I want some blue shadow. So this is the phthalo blue here, and actually some cerulean too. Either one is a lovely blue for shadow. And I'm going to put some shadow under those trees. I want to leave the white there. And don't forget that when this is perfectly dry, I'm going to use my white jelly roll pen and my glitter jelly roll pen to put some snowflakes. And I'm also going to use my black pen, the silver's on there, to really go around the top of the bauble here. So you can see that. Now, I have no idea what I did with my original. Oh, I know, here it is. So I've got the words Merry Christmas here, and I stamped those words on there. And I also ahead of time prepared lots of the words ready stamped, and I brought one of my stamps with me. That one's too wide. So you can prepare your stamps ahead of time. You can write your words on there. Most of the craft stores, I'm actually going to take that up a little higher. Most of the craft stores have Christmas stamps, especially Michael's this time of year for stamping on your Christmas cards. So for just a few dollars, you can pick up Christmas stamps. I want the ribbon to come right off the edge of the paper. I'm just going to blend that in with a little water. And this is not looking as crisp as my original because it's too wet really to do the trees. Also, I'm feeling my original one here, and it's very smooth. I've done this one on a hot press paper, which is much smoother than this one, which is a cold press paper. So this may be one that is better done on a hot press paper. And I have somewhere some blue card to mount that on. And who knows where the blue card has got to. Somewhere I have some blue card to mount that on. Well, here we go. I knew I had some somewhere. So that would mount onto some blue card. And so that I don't have to mess up my painting by stamping right onto it, if I'm not sure about stamping, you can stamp it ahead of time on a piece of paper. I've put some little what are called dimensionals on here that will lift the paper up from the card and make it a little bit three-dimensional. So you can finish this card off that way, or you can put a stamp. Or if you're good at calligraphy, you can just write your Merry Christmas on there if you would like to use a nice pen to do that. So let's put that to one side. And that one to one side. That's our Christmas bauble.
Caroline?
Yes?
We have a question from Nancy on the chat.
Okay.
And they're just wondering if there's any issue with replacing colors. They don't have all of the same colors as you do.
When they take the live class, and if they're taking the live class, I will be sending them a sheet that has colors and alternative colors on the sheet. So Nancy, if you're taking the live class, you will get the sheet with the color examples, and the sheet will give you all sorts of alternatives for the colors that I'm using. And also I will send a color mixing chart as well for mixing the colors. So don't worry, all that information is written down. I know it's a lot to take in when I'm actually teaching, and remember, I'm frantically probably trying to take notes, but don't worry, I have it all written down, and definitely you don't have to use the colors I'm using. There's lots of alternatives, and sometimes when I'm repainting a picture, I don't even use the same colors I used on the previous one. Even though I write it down, it doesn't come out exactly the same. So that's a very good question too. And it's good to know on your color chart which are your cool blues and which are your warm blues and which are your strong greens and which are your more gentle greens. So I'm just going to, thanks for that question, Dean, that was very timely. I'm going to remove that little circle. Hopefully this is dry enough to do that. I just need something to pull the edge up. And again, if I dared to put my hairdryer on, it comes up much more easily. If you put a little bit of heat on that, it melts the glue. This one is not cooperating. Usually they just pop off of there like nothing. There we go. And I have an eraser. I have not only an eraser, I have a little glue remover in my bag too. So we can get rid of that glue. So that is your moon there. And I'm going to show you how I would sprinkle on the snow before I do the trees. It'll give it a little bit more chance to dry before I put the trees on there. Now I'm just looking for something to protect everything. When I splatter, everything gets splattered, so I need to protect the area. At home I have something called a splatter box. It's just a little box that I put everything in when I splatter stuff so it doesn't get all over the place. Let's put that down there for now. Right, so the Dr. P.H. Martin's white. I think every watercolorist has, and calligrapher has a bottle of this. It's such great stuff. I'm going to get a biggish, strongish brush, and I've mixed my white in this little pot here. I'm going to get a little bit of the white, and I'm going to mix it with some water. You can remix it. If it's dry, you don't have to throw it out. I just keep it in this pot. You can remix it with water. It wets up again, just like watercolor paint. I'm just wetting that up. It's quite thick stuff. Sort of want it to be like cream. And you can use anything for this, but a toothbrush is a great splatter. See, I've already splattered and I haven't even started yet. There we go. I'm just getting it on there with my brush and rubbing the toothbrush in the white. We don't need too much to make a good snowstorm. And then you get your thumb on the brush, turn it upside down and splatter. See, it's everywhere. It's going everywhere. It's washable. Clean it all up afterwards. It's not permanent, so even if you splat your clothing, it will come off in the washing machine. No problem. I'm going to put that in there. Just dab that. So that's your snow in this one. If we have time, I will show you the salt snow before we finish. How are we doing for time, Dean? What are we at? You know, anybody know what time we're at? How long we've been going?
40 minutes.
40 minutes? Okay, thank you. Right, okay, we're going to do the big trees on this. And again, if you take new adventures in watercolor, I'm going to spend a whole lesson on painting trees, different shapes and colors of trees. I love them, and I went out photographing all the trees in Bevan Park and Bowen Park in the fall when all the colors were beautiful. So I want a nice deep green for my trees. I want it, if you look at these ones, really deep evergreen blue-green color. So I've got some of that made up here with ultramarine. Ultramarine blue is a great one, and I really, no matter what other colors you buy or have, I really think you need to have ultramarine blue if you have questions about color. That's sort of a staple. So I'm putting a lot of ultramarine blue in there. And another staple one that you really, really need to have is burnt sienna, I think, because when I mix burnt sienna with the ultramarine blue, I get that beautiful, beautiful dark green. And I'm going to put a little bit of phthalo green in there. Now, you don't have to have phthalo green. You can use phthalo blue in there. It's not an exact science. It's sort of mixing your blues and greens and your browns until you get the color you want. You don't have to use the exact colors I'm using, but you want it really nice and dark. We need to have a dark green for these trees. And before I start, I also need to make sure that I know where I'm going with the tree by drawing in the trunk with my pencil, because I can get lost. So I know that I want my tree to come up quite high up here, and I want it to sort of come down right to the edge of the tape here. And this other tree is off to the side. It's sort of coming in from the side, but I'm going to concentrate on this one first. And I always start at the top of the tree. I'm going to my smallest brush, which is my number 2 brush. I will get bigger brushes as I come down the tree. And I start at the top with these little fir branches at the top of the tree. Now, if you actually go out and observe fir trees in the wild, in their natural environment, you'll notice that there's many different types of fir tree, and their branches do different things. If it's the Douglas, the big, heavy Douglas fir, the branches are really big and heavy, and they droop down. Same with the cedar trees. The cedar trees have big, heavy branches, and they droop down. But some of your other fir trees, especially the ones that they grow for Christmas trees and the spruces, their branches go up. They're lighter branches and they curve upwards. So I'm doing one of the sort of more Christmassy trees here with the curving upward branches. Now, what you don't want to do, I'm going to take a little bit of paper here and do a little aside. That over here. Do the trunk of my tree. What you don't want to do is this side, 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 this side. You don't want to make your tree extremely even unless you're making a very stylized Christmas tree for a card. It's okay then. But what we're doing here is we're doing a tree growing outdoors where one side of the tree is going to be thicker than the other, where some of the branches are going to get blown off by the wind. And you want to have some variety. So this side maybe is going to have a little bit more weight here. And this side here, maybe it's lost a few branches here, so it's different. And then maybe down here, same thing. We're getting a different shape on this side. So don't be too regular with your tree. It may not make it to the Christmas tree cut because it's not perfect enough, but we want it to look a little bit would like you to try and make it look a little bit more natural. Now I'm mixing up a little bit more color. And you might say to me, how do you get the same color again when you mix halfway through? I don't care. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have the same color. It's absolutely wonderful if you have a slightly different color, because nothing on that tree is going to be the same color. Some of the branches are going to be in shadow, some are going to be in light. We're not going to actually fuss a lot about light and shadow with this tree, but as we get further down the tree, I'm just going to take a little bit of the brown and I'm just going to show a little bit of the trunk in places. And I'm actually going to get that brown on my brush. I'm going to dab it in a few places just to add a little bit of brown shadow, because I don't want all one color. So it really just doesn't matter. The more colors, I'm actually going to have some light green on my palette from the Christmas tree we did at the beginning. I'm actually going to grab some of that. I want to put a bit of that in over here. I'm just go to a bigger brush now. This is my number 4. And I'm going to put a bit more of that light in. I'm really liking, I didn't do that on the other one. And I'm really liking how the light green on this side looks a little bit different to the dark green. And you'll notice as I come down the tree, I have much wider branches. And you can have a little bit of the trunk showing. Now the last part of this picture is to have the tree on this side. See, if that tree is just there in the middle, this side of the painting just looks a little bit odd if we have nothing here. We've got the moon here and we've got the shadow here. Really, really needs something over this side. And it's a tree that's just out of our sight a little bit. Just some of the branches are coming into our line of sight. And if you take photographs, you know that's what happens. Like, your whole photograph's not going to be all just one thing in the center. There's other things coming and going from the side of the picture. I'm going to go to that light green. And you don't need to paint your trees as fast as I'm painting here. You can take your time. And if we need to, anytime you're like, stop, you're going too fast, we can back up a bit and you can paint while I answer your questions or you show me what you're doing. That doesn't look a lot like this one. I mean, there's quite a difference between my two trees. And I did splatter the snow after the trees on that one. And I put the little Merry Christmas just in here, or Winter Wonderland I put on that one. So you can, and again, you can stamp your little Christmas sayings first and then glue them on afterwards, if that's easier for you, if that doesn't make you nervous stamping something onto your watercolor painting. Now, again, like, this is a good watercolor paper, so when I take the tape off, this side's a little bit wet to take the tape off actually, but I'm still going to risk it. And that's one thing that's very difficult to demonstrate in class, because we have a limited time, is how much drying time is really involved in doing watercolor. You really need to, a lot of the time, just let it dry for an hour. If I'm doing a big painting, a big wash, dry overnight. You can use a hairdryer, but that shrinks your paper quite quickly, and sometimes you'll get a real buckle to your paper if you shrink it too quickly. Now I think we've got time to do the very last one. Got a pile of mess here. I'll put that out the way. There we go. This one's called Winter Moon. That there. Just looking for my sample. It should be here somewhere. There it is. Now I left this one for last, and I know that drawing and painting this, let's put it over where you can see it, painting this tree is going to be tricky for you. You can, if you want to cheat, you can get rubber stamps that are a beautiful twiggy tree like this or a Christmas tree, and you can just stamp that thing on with black ink when you're all finished. There's a shop in town, Crafty Capers, that has every rubber stamp under the sun, beautiful trees. So you can do that. You don't have to be an accomplished artist to do a beautiful card. If you're feeling very nervous about the tree part, see if you can find yourself a nice rubber stamp to do that. But we will attempt it. But this method is going to show you how to use the salt to make the snow. Right, I'm going to put my moon in again. Again, I'm going to have my moon top right because I'm going to have my tree bottom left. I want balance there. If I have my moon over here behind my tree, this whole side of the painting is left unbalanced, and it won't look right. I want to put my snowbank in, again, about 1/3 of the way down. I'm not measuring it, but you can. I just kind of do it by eye. The rule of thirds is one of the best ones to use if you're not sure about composition. 1/3 of everything, and you won't go wrong. And then I'm going to put another snowbank, just like the one we just did. I'm going to have my snowbanks going down. I'm going to use different colors in the sky this time. I'm going to use some dark blue and some purple. And salt. I have just regular table salt. Nothing special, just your regular table salt. Now my favorite purple is dioxazine purple. I'm hoping I have some here. Yeah, or some brands call it dioxazine violet. Some call it dioxazine purple, but it's a very, I'll show you on a piece of paper. It's a very intense, beautiful, beautiful violet. And it's just lovely. Very difficult to mix a color that's that beautiful and intense. So that's what I'm going to use for the sky, and I'm also going to use ultramarine blue. I'm sorry, I'm mixing over here because my other palette's too messy. And if I was at home, this is the point where I go to the kitchen sink and clean up all my palettes, get clean water, all those kinds of things. So when you take these classes and in the future, or if you're signing friends up for them, just make sure before class starts, and I'll send you all of the information you need about what you need. You just need to have everything there when the class starts, because you can run off and look for things, but you'll miss something when you're doing that, and it makes it difficult. So I'll send you a list of like the size paper you need, the brushes you need, what you need around you, and then you don't have to keep going and looking for things while we're learning. So I've got ultramarine blue, and I've got some dioxazine purple, which I usually call D purple because dioxazine is such a long word to get out. And it's much easier to get your colors to blend if you wet the paper a little bit. So just the sky, and you'll notice my water is a bit blue because it's dirty. Doesn't matter, I'm going to put a lot of blue and purple in the sky, so I'm not worried about that. I'm actually going to put a tiny bit of phthalo blue with the ultramarine because it's a lovely color, no other reason. And I'm going to put a little bit of the blue, clean my brush, get the lovely purple color I have here. And I'm going to put that on. You have to be quite intense with this color because it dries lighter, and we're also going to put the salt on it. So we want some nice intense color to work with the salt. Now that needs to soak in a little bit. Some people make the mistake of putting the salt on now when it's too wet. Other people make the mistake of waiting till it's way too dry. I'm just gonna dab a little bit of that up there. A little bit too wet. I don't want that bloom there. Let's take that off. It has to be at the Goldilocks stage, just wet enough and not too dry for the salt to work properly. So you have to keep an eye on it. When it's very, very shiny, it's too wet. When it's very, very matte, it's too dry. So just keep an eye on how it's doing, how it's cooking there. I'm going to do the snowbanks when I'm just letting that color soak in and dry a little bit. I'm putting Just the ultramarine blue on this snowbank here. Again, hard edge, don't want a hard edge. So I get my wet brush and I actually like jiggle it into the paint like that to soften up that edge. Have to do that before it dries. If you let that, I'm going to put a little bit of purple with the blue. If you let that blue dry before you get the water to soften the edge, you will still have a hard edge. You won't be able to soften it. Has to be pretty immediate. And I'm going to put a little bit of blue down at this corner because I have this tape making a nice white border, and if I don't put some color against it, you're not going to actually notice that I have that lovely white border. Now I think this is almost ready for the salt. First of all, I put a little bit in my hand, and then I get it like I was making a stew, a little pinch of salt, and sprinkle that, sprinkle it into your sky. You can sprinkle a bit down here in the snow too. Not too much, but enough to make a little bit of a snowstorm. Now, I don't know the exact science of this, but I think what happens is the salt absorbs the water that's there. And as it absorbs the water, it pushes the pigment away from the dry patch, and you get little sparkles where the salt absorbs the water. And that's why it has to be just the perfect wetness, because if it's too wet, the salt dissolves and does nothing. It doesn't push the pigment away. And if it's too dry, the salt can't absorb anything. You know it's just right if when it's finished, you have lots of lovely little snowflakes and no salt left. I'll put a little bit more on there. And it takes a few minutes to work, so you have to be a little bit patient while it's working. And again, this has all got to be dry before we put that tree on. So what I'm going to do, just while we're waiting for that to dry, I'm going to get another piece of paper and just demonstrate the painting of the tree while the salt's working. You can actually see here the salt is starting to work on that snow there. You can see a little bit just here. And it has to have a little bit of time to do its magic. So I'm just going to put that down there for a moment. And can you see that, Justice? Can you see my paper here? Is that okay? Yep. That good? Okay. Right, so we want to have a bare tree with no branches. So I want to, and you have to remember that tree trunks are not that thick. If you make them too thick and stumpy, they do not look elegant like trees should. So I'm doing first the major trunk here, and right next to it, the second tree trunk. And I want to have one leaning towards the other. So I'm putting that in, and now I have one branch going off here. And I'm making sure that I have all of these branches where I want them before I start to paint. The only thing you need to be able to do to paint these type of trees is a Y. Why is that? Because every branch comes to a Y at the end. And if you just keep on doing those Ys, it will look like a tree with no leaves on. I'm looking for my what's called a rigger or a liner brush. Now this is a very dark color. It may look black to you, but it's actually a combination of colors. So I'm going to mix ultramarine blue with some phthalo blue with that deep purple and some alizarin crimson and some Payne's gray and then some brown. And you have to mix it up fairly intensely to get something that's close to a black. And you may ask, you might even ask, why don't you just use black paint? Wouldn't that be simpler? Well, you'll find that most watercolorists don't like black paint. It's fine if you're doing acrylic and oil. It seems to be a good color to use. But in watercolor, black paint seems to be a very dead color to use with no vibrancy to it. If you mix your own blacks using your primary colors, your blue, your red, and browns for your yellow, you can get a beautiful dark color that's full of vibrancy, that's full of color. And when you dilute this color, you can get shadows and light areas that have all those beautiful colors in them. So this thin number 1 rigger brush is a nice long thin brush that you can do very thin lines with. And I like to pull up with this brush. Now I'll tell you what I mean about the Y. I'm going to pull this top of this tree here into a Y shape, and then here, or a V shape if you like, and another one here, and then another one here, another one here, and so on. You can have one going behind here. And as if I want my line to be lighter and not as thick, I just sort of lift my brush. When I want the line down here towards I want this a little bit thicker. It's better to start thin and then thicken up a little bit rather than start too thick. I want to go behind this tree, and then we do the V or the Y, and a V and a Y. And they get thinner and thinner as you go up the tree. And I like to just start with the pencil and then start adding them with the brush as I go along. And of course it's up to you whether you prefer to do a lot of them with pencil first so that you know where they're going to be, or whether you would like to do most of your branches using your brush. One good thing to do is sort of wiggle your brush a little bit so your branches are not too straight. You want them to have some, bends in them, some curves. Some of them, they don't all have to go upwards. Some can come downwards. And as you start to build your tree with your branches, you can start to see kind of where you would like more, where you would like some to go behind other branches. I think the key is not to get too carried away in the end and overdo it. And remember, some of these can go behind or in front of the other tree. And I'm doing that V or that Y on the end of all of these branches, getting softer and softer as I go along. So that's how you do your tree. The one, of course, in this card is a little bit taller. We would just, you want your tree to be taller, you just sort of get that a little bit bolder line, and we go up a little further. It's always better to start smaller than you intend and then build up. It's like I say, if you make your trunk or your tree too thick to start with, it's impossible to go back. Watercolor, the one thing about it is you can't erase, you can't go over your mistakes. You just have to either put something else there, like Merry Christmas over your mistake or something else, or start over. I've found many, many ways to fix up mistakes, cover them up, do something else over the top, cut them out. There's always a way. And if everything else fails, you have your Doc Martens bleed-proof white, which is almost a perfect match for watercolor paper. And you can, let's get one of these first pieces of paper we did here. You really, really have to fix a mistake. You can get your PH Martens white and fix it up with a white paint that's designed to be a warm white, the color of watercolor paper. And that's why it's such a great tool to have and it lasts for years. A pot like that lasts absolutely years. You don't use very much unless you are a prolific painter or calligrapher. So that's how you would do the tree on this painting. This Let It Snow here is actually cut out. It's cut out with a die cut and then glued on. And I've also put some sparkly pen on here too, so that we have some sparkle. I have all kinds of sparkly pen. This one is called a Wink of Stella, and it's a brush pen, and just give it a shake, and you can put some sparkle on the snow with that. It's really, really nice. Wink of Stella, just clear sparkle pen. And I have some other Jelly Roll sparkle pens too. These Jelly Roll pens have some lovely, and glaze pens, which just give your Christmas card a little bit of an edge, make them rather beautiful. So let's have a look at our salt here. You can see it's starting to work. It's still a little bit wet. You can see down here. But when it's all dry, you'll have a lovely snowstorm in your salt. And of course, your tree would go here. So that is our, I'll put them out here, the 4 cards we have looked at doing. So this was the very last one. And then there was this one here. That was the Christmas bauble. And then the Christmas tree. And you know that you can rewatch this lesson. I know it's probably very hard to keep up. And I had trouble getting them all done in this amount of time. So they're not as carefully done as if I'd been at home and letting them dry. And the wonderful thing about taking this class is you can watch it again. You can pause this. You can go make a cup of tea, let your watercolor dry, and then you can come back and work on your cards in your own time, not rushed and trying to do it wet on wet, which is not always a good way to work. And if you're curious about the paper I'm using for the backing here, again, it's available in so many places. Michael's has pads and pads and pads of this colored paper. It's about $5 for, I think, 25 sheets, maybe 50 sheets. I can't remember, but not that expensive. The sparkly Christmas paper I got for $5.99. It was red, gold, silver, and green in the package, which gives you a nice variety for Christmas. You can also get them at Dollar Tree. Sometimes Dollarama will have it. Crafty Capers in town on Bowen Road sells lots of colored cardstock, and I'm pretty sure that Iron Oxide probably has a lot of colored cardstock too, so it's something you can get all over the place if you want to have some pretty colored cardstock for your backing. So there's our 4 cards. Thank you for joining me today. Really excited to have you here in the class, and I hope you've enjoyed painting, and I hope I see you again for our next class. And don't forget to check out all the other classes that Inspirations has going. There's theater, there's oh goodness, voice, there's all kind of puppeteering, making puppets, all sorts of things, creative things, and a wonderful Christmas gift. If you're wondering what to get for your friend or your family, get them a class. There's something for them to do after Christmas and enjoy for weeks to come. So thank you for joining me today, and have fun painting. Bye for now.